A shadowy figure steps from the dunes, eyes fixed on the fragile turtle eggs. Poachers, ruthless and merciless. Olivia's heart races as they dig through the sand, destroying everything she's fought for. But just as the worst seems inevitable, a voice rings out, fierce and unwavering. Who is this stranger, and can they stop what's already begun? But what happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. The beach stretched out in front of Dr. Olivia Wright, an expanse of glistening sand illuminated by the soft, silvery glow of the moon. The tide lapped gently at the shore, a rhythmic, soothing sound that contrasted with the intense focus in her eyes. Olivia had worked in marine conservation for most of her adult life, dedicating herself to the preservation of creatures like the sea turtles she now watched. Yet, tonight, something seemed different. Something about the way the cool breeze swept across the beach, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She sat on the sand, her camera resting on her lap, hands poised to capture a moment that felt destined to happen. Earlier in the day, she had encountered a turtle, injured and struggling to make its way back into the water. Its shell bore the unmistakable signs of a predator's attack, cracked and battered, a silent testament to the threats these creatures faced daily. Olivia had tended to it, applying the right treatment, but deep down, she knew the odds of the turtle surviving were slim. It was an experience that gnawed at her, a reminder of the cruel indifference of the world. Yet, here, now, the scene unfolding before her was something rare. A glimpse of hope in the form of this lone turtle, a creature unaware of the human eyes fixed on it. Sienna, as Olivia would later call her, was methodical in her movements. With each graceful flick of her flippers, the turtle dug a nest in the soft, dark sand, her instincts pulling her deeper into the earth. Olivia's breath hitched in awe. The turtle's movements were slow but deliberate, as if she understood the magnitude of what she was doing. Olivia had witnessed the laying of eggs countless times, but this moment felt different, more sacred. It was as though the turtle's very life force was being transferred into the fragile eggs beneath her, a quiet promise to the future. Olivia could almost feel the weight of that promise, the sense that this egg-laying wasn't just a biological act, but a defiant cry in the face of everything trying to tear the world apart. Unbeknownst to her, there was someone else watching from the shadows. Ethan Cole, a man who had long since buried his hope for humanity's ability to make a difference, stood at the edge of the dunes, his eyes fixed on the delicate dance unfolding before him. Ethan had been a conservationist, once filled with passion and purpose, but years of witnessing destruction, apathy, and indifference had worn him down. He had grown cynical, disillusioned by the constant battle against forces too vast to fight. But tonight, the scene of Olivia crouched low to the ground, her hand steady as she adjusted her camera, stirred something in him. It wasn't just the turtle's grace, or the quiet reverence Olivia exuded as she watched. It was the sheer audacity of it all. The audacity to hope, to fight for something greater than oneself, despite the odds. Something within Ethan shifted. For the first time in a long while, he felt the faintest stirrings of belief, like a spark of light cutting through the fog of despair. As Sienna finished laying her eggs, her body moving in perfect harmony with the rhythm of the earth, Ethan stepped back, careful not to make a sound. He wasn't sure what had compelled him to come here tonight, but as the turtle retreated back toward the water, he knew he couldn't walk away without doing something. The world needed more than just people like Olivia, people who gave all they had, day after day, fighting a war against forces they couldn't control. It needed people who had the courage to believe again. And for the first time in years, Ethan felt a flicker of that courage deep within him. He watched as Olivia took one last photograph of the sight, her fingers lingering over the lens as though capturing more than just an image. She was preserving a piece of hope, a moment in time that proved there was still life in this world, still beauty to fight for. The turtle's eggs, fragile and precious, were a reminder of the delicate balance between life and death. In that moment, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in years, a renewed sense of purpose He knew he had to act, had to join the fight once more. And just like that, the quiet beginning of something profound unfolded under the moonlight. The night was still, broken only by the rhythmic pull of the ocean, its waves washing up against the shore with a calming certainty. Olivia, her hands covered in sand, gently cradled the precious eggs and moved them to the makeshift safe zone she'd prepared for them, a small, sheltered area just beyond the reach of the tides. The turtle had finished her task, retreating back into the water with the quiet dignity of a creature who had fulfilled her ancient role. Yet, as Olivia settled into the task of securing the eggs, a strange unease crept over her. The air, thick with salt and the scent of the ocean, felt suddenly heavy, charged with an unspoken tension. She couldn't explain it, but there was a sense that something was off, as though the delicate balance of the night was about to shift in a way she wasn't prepared for. As if on cue, a voice emerged from the darkness behind her, breaking the silence with a softness that carried an undercurrent of something more, an edge to it that made Olivia's spine straighten instinctively. "You know, if you let them stay here, they might be dug up by predators." Startled, Olivia whirled around, her heart pounding for a beat too long. She hadn't heard anyone approach. Standing at the edge of the dunes, just out of the reach of the pale moonlight, was a man, tall, broad-shouldered, his figure mostly shadowed. His eyes, though, were striking, an unusual shade of green that seemed to shimmer with a knowing that she couldn't place. His gaze was fixed on the eggs, steady and intense, as though he knew their fate as well as she did. For a moment, Olivia's pulse quickened. She hadn't heard the sound of footsteps, hadn't sensed anyone else out here. She was alone in this part of the beach, or at least she had thought she was. "I'm sorry," she said, quickly brushing sand off her hands, suddenly feeling exposed. "I didn't see you there." The man offered a soft, almost imperceptible smile, a gesture that seemed both genuine and cautious. "I've been following the turtles for a while now. You're doing good work here." His words were calm, unassuming, but there was a gravity in his tone, something deeper than mere appreciation. Olivia paused, studying him for a moment longer. She didn't quite know why, but his presence, quiet and unannounced, set something on edge in her. It was an instinct she had learned to trust, something in her bones that told her when things weren't entirely as they seemed. "Thank you," she said after a beat, her voice measured, though she couldn't shake the sense that this man, this stranger, wasn't just another concerned observer. "I'm just trying to make sure they have a chance to survive." Her words felt hollow in the thick night air, as if the very act of speaking them only underscored the precariousness of what she was doing. The turtles were always vulnerable, always at the mercy of nature's cruelty. It was a reality she had come to accept over the years, but the quiet, steady rhythm of the man's gaze, his calm assessment of her actions, made her wonder if he knew more about that vulnerability than he let on. The silence lingered between them for a moment, thick and charged with something unspoken. Olivia shifted slightly, her hands folding together. She felt the pull of his gaze again, more than just an observer's curiosity, but something deeper, more searching. She could feel his eyes assessing her, calculating, and something about it made her pause. Her instincts urged her to probe further, to challenge this unexpected interruption to her careful solitude. "What brings you here exactly?" she asked, her voice steady but layered with a quiet caution. The question hung in the air, unanswered for a moment, as Ethan's green eyes met hers, steady and unreadable. In the distance, the ocean crashed against the shore, but for that moment, all she could hear was the steady thrum of her own pulse, the anticipation of his response. The night, once calm and serene, now felt oppressive, thick with tension and the sour taste of imminent danger. Olivia's focus had been entirely on the task at hand, preserving the life of the turtle's future, securing the fragile eggs she'd painstakingly moved. The world had narrowed to the simple, quiet rhythm of sand beneath her fingers, the distant pull of the tide, the weight of the night pressing down around her. But that fragile peace shattered with a sudden, jarring noise, an unnatural screech, followed by the unmistakable rustling of disturbed sand. Her heart lurched. The instinct to protect, deeply embedded in her, flared violently. In that split second, she knew. She knew what was happening before her eyes even fully registered the scene unfolding before her. A group of figures emerging from the shadows, their movements deliberate and sharp, had materialized on the beach. They were poachers. The sound of their boots crunching the sand echoed ominously through the quiet night, a stark contrast to the gentle rush of the waves. Their eyes gleamed with a hunger that had nothing to do with survival, a greed that had no place in the natural order. Olivia's breath caught in her throat as she watched them, unable to move for a moment. The poachers were already kneeling near the turtle's nest, their hands like predatory claws, digging and pulling at the earth with ruthless efficiency. With every egg they unearthed, Olivia's heart plummeted deeper. Each fragile, white shell, meant to cradle the beginning of new life, was yanked from its sanctuary, as though it were nothing more than a trinket. Her legs moved instinctively, but the realization struck her too late. She wasn't fast enough, not strong enough to take on the men who had already set their sights on the prize. The weight of failure settled over her, like a suffocating blanket. She had been so consumed by the delicate beauty of the moment, by the solitary connection between the turtle and the earth, that she had missed the threat growing just beyond her sight. Ethan, however, reacted without hesitation. His body tensed, his face tightening with a mix of fury and disbelief. His gaze flicked to Olivia for only a moment, but it was enough to know that she felt the same gnawing frustration. There was no time to waste in fear. There was only time to act. His fists clenched at his sides, a muscle in his jaw twitching. Without uttering a single word, Ethan surged forward, his body moving with the kind of swift precision that only years of practice could hone. The poachers didn't seem to register his presence until his voice rang out across the beach, low and furious, but sharp enough to cut through the night air. "Stop!" he shouted. His voice, raw with authority, carried across the sand, but instead of retreating, the men simply chuckled, unfazed. Their eyes flicked up briefly, annoyed more than intimidated, and they continued their work without a pause, like predators who had already claimed their prey. The chaos that followed was immediate. Ethan, undeterred, lunged at the nearest poacher, the tension of the moment snapping into violence. He grabbed a shovel from the ground, his hands firm around its handle, and swung it with a powerful arc, aimed directly at the man's head. There was no time for a second thought, no space for fear. Only the raw instinct to fight, to stop this senseless destruction of life. Olivia stood frozen for a moment, her chest tight with panic, but the shock quickly dissipated into action. She knew she had to do something, anything, to stop them. Her mind raced, calculating the best way to intervene, but she was one woman, and they were many. The men were stronger, faster, and Olivia realized with a sinking heart that without help, this would not end well. Desperation surged in her chest, and her gaze darted between the poachers, Ethan, and the eggs. They were too close. Too many. The odds were against them, but Ethan wasn't backing down, neither would she. The night, once full of possibility, had now become a battlefield, and Olivia, with a steady breath, prepared to face whatever came next. The night, once thick with tension and the sharp sting of imminent loss, slowly began to settle as the poachers retreated, swallowed by the shadows from which they had emerged. The dim glow of the moonlight bathed the beach in a surreal quiet, the waves now sounding softer, as if nature itself exhaled a sigh of relief. Olivia stood there, her body still trembling from the rush of adrenaline, her breath coming in shallow bursts, yet there was an undeniable weight lifting from her chest. She had thought, for a moment, that all was lost, that the poachers would leave nothing but destruction in their wake. But Ethan had stepped in, not just to protect the turtles, but to protect the very essence of what made this fight worth it. His courage had given her a glimpse of something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time: hope. In the quiet aftermath, Olivia turned to survey the damage. The poachers had left behind a trail of disturbed sand, but there, nestled in the heart of it, The eggs remained, vulnerable but intact. The nest had been compromised, yes, but the future it represented wasn't lost. Ethan's quick thinking and steadfast resolve had given her a second chance to secure their survival. It wasn't just the turtles that had been saved tonight. It was a fragile belief, long buried beneath the weight of cynicism, that maybe, just maybe, there were still people who cared enough to act, who were willing to protect what mattered. As the authorities arrived in the distance, their lights piercing the darkness, Olivia and Ethan worked side by side, their movements synchronized with a shared sense of urgency. They carefully relocated the eggs, placing them in a new, more secure spot, where they would be less vulnerable to the forces of nature, and to humans who would seek to destroy them for profit. Each egg, delicate and fragile, felt like a small victory, a promise of life yet to come. Olivia's hands, steady now, cradled the eggs with a tenderness she hadn't realized she had lost until tonight. She glanced at Ethan, watching him move with a quiet intensity, his hands sure and practiced, his focus unwavering. He had acted without hesitation, without the need for recognition or praise. In his silence, he had shown her more than words ever could, that true protectors don't wait for the perfect moment to make a difference. They step forward when they're needed, no matter the cost. Once the eggs were safely nestled in their new haven, Olivia felt the weight of the night's events settle into her bones. She had come here to protect a species, to ensure their survival. But tonight, she realized, she had been given something far more invaluable. Ethan had shown her that there was still good in the world, that there were still people who fought not just for what they believed in, but for others, for the creatures who couldn't speak for themselves. As the sound of the waves continued to weave through the air, Olivia turned toward him, her eyes softening with gratitude. Her voice, barely a whisper above the tide, broke the silence. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." Ethan's response was simple, yet it carried a weight that made her chest tighten. "Sometimes you just have to step in. We all have a role to play." His words hung in the air, settling around them like a promise. It wasn't grand or dramatic. There were no sweeping gestures, no proclamations of saving the world. It was just the quiet truth that change often started in the smallest, most unexpected of moments. In that instant, Olivia understood. She understood that it wasn't the grand gestures that made a difference. It was the steady, unwavering actions of people like Ethan, who chose to believe that the world could be better, that the fight was worth it. And as they stood there, side by side, in the soft glow of moonlight, Olivia realized that her next step was clear. She wasn't alone in this fight, not anymore. With people like Ethan by her side, there was still hope. There was still a chance to protect what remained of the world's fragile beauty. And for the first time in a long while, she felt ready to face the future, to continue the fight, to restore faith not just in the turtles, but in humanity itself. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but she no longer walked it alone.